Okay, everyone, please take your seats. We're about to start. Thank you very much, everyone. We'd like to start the conversation in a second. I would like to invite our friend, the brilliant and famous democracy activist, Garry Kasparov, the chairman and founder of the Renew Democracy Initiative, to come up here and give us some opening remarks before we start our discussion. Garry, please, welcome.
Thank you, Damer. Good morning. Thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to thank Prime Minister Plenković, the Minister of Foreign and European Affairs, and the other organizers of the Dubrovnik Forum. I've lived in New York ever since I was forced to leave Russia in 2013, facing imminent arrest. However, I'm speaking here as a proud citizen of the Republic of Croatia. We have more than an EU passport in common. We share democratic European values. And because of that, I will always speak of Europe in terms of we and us. Standing here in Croatia, a NATO member, I get no satisfaction from stating NATO is effectively dead. I already got in trouble for saying NATO is dead at the Halifax Security Forum in Canada last year. It doesn't faze me, but I can see some faces beginning to turn, so allow me to explain what I mean. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, as it was originally conceived, is irrelevant. In 1949, the alliance was set up as a bloc of democratic European nations under American protection with one purpose, and one purpose only: to fight one war, not a war in Afghanistan or in Libya. This alliance was meant to fight a war to defend the continent from a Russian attack. Well, Putin's Russia has begun its long anticipated westward aggression in 2014 and expanding its attack in 2022. Where are the Americans, the supposed guarantors of European security? Under the Obama administration, they did nothing. Oh, actually, worse than nothing. By continuing negotiations with Russia on climate change, Iranian nuclear program, Middle East, while largely ignoring Putin's blatant violation of the international order on European soil. Under the Biden administration, they dragged their feet, providing assistance to Ukraine too little, too late. They lectured Kyiv about escalation, their favorite word, as Russia dragged Ukraine into an ever more gruesome war. Now, under Trump administration, the United States is hostile, arguably an active collaborator with Moscow. Where are we, the Europeans? We have allowed our muscles to atrophy. The European institutions that lifted the continent out of the ashes of World War II and enabled a nation like Croatia to prosper after the turmoil of the 1990s, these institutions were built without a serious military component. Security, what question mark? Oh, the Americans will take care of that. This was always the assumption. It was only last year that the European Commission finally established a Director General for Defense Industry and Space. For decades, we prospered. But even as we prospered, our safety was an illusion paid for by American largesse. Now we see that an alliance designed for collective security is functioning like a protection racket. This is a natural consequence of outsourcing our safety to Washington. We were blind to the isolation mood rising at both ends of the American political spectrum. So far, I've only given you bad news. But there is a silver lining. One, through the sacrifice of thousands upon thousands of brave Ukrainians. Europe is indeed behind, both militarily and technologically. But Europe has a robust economy and manpower. Europe's backwardness is the result of a political choice. We can catch up with the Ukraine as a cornerstone of a new European security architecture. Ukraine is not only defying so-called expert analysis, fighting on the 5th year of a 3-day war, Putin's planned 3 days war, an assumption, by the way, shared by most of the Western governments back then in 22. Ukraine is the only nation in Europe that is really preparing for the day after America withdraws. Ukraine is proactively building the post-American security order on the battlefield today. What they're doing is truly revolutionary. Ukraine knocks out a $50,000 Iranian Shaheds with improvised drones that cost a fraction of that price, far less expensive than American Patriots or even Israeli Iron Dome interceptors. Ukraine is ahead of many nations in integrating artificial intelligence into the battlefield. Ukraine will soon fly Swedish fighter jets in its air force rather than only rely entirely upon American models. And I can say that my country, Croatia, also purchased European French jets to diversify the defense components. Ukraine strikes back deep into Russia. We can read it every day, so that's the best sweet for my coffee. The news of Ukrainian successful strikes into deep on Russian territory, successful strikes. Whether or not the warlords in Washington give them their blessing. It is a tragedy that Ukrainians have paid a deadly price in order to reverse Europe's technological and military decline. You can honor their sacrifice by supporting them and following their example by putting your weight abroad and innovating at home. It will ultimately be to the benefit of us all. Advances in medical and consumer technologies are often downstream of development in battlefield science. Consider what Ukraine has accomplished despite the obstacles. Ukrainians are only broke free of the Russian Soviet Empire again in 1991. Its sovereignty has been under brutal attack for a third of its modern independent existence. Europe is wanting for willpower, not resources. This is the challenge facing Europe and all countries that once counted on the United States for support. I'm joined at this forum by ministers from many such democratic allies: Germany, Japan, France, Italy, Lithuania, Albania, Slovenia, Bulgaria, Portugal, Kosovo, Hungary, North Macedonia. Forgive me if I missed any. You will return to your capitals and debate the particulars of your foreign and defense policies. But let these principles be your North Star, a commitment to real European collective defense and homegrown technological excellence. The boldness to finally cut the umbilical cord with the United States. A serious recognition of the fact that Putin regime is devoted to perpetual war. And the self-respect to actually stand up and fight for our democratic way of life. Thank you. Where do I sit?
Just have a seat down there. Gary, thank you very much. I'd like to now just call our panelists up. Mr. Ivan Anušić, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense for Croatia. Mr. Kęstutis Budrys, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania. Mr. Marko Primorac, Vice President of the European Investment Bank. And Mr. Jordan Embry, the Heritage Foundation. Round of applause, guys. Well, all right. Well, thank you very much. My name is Damir Marušić. I'm from the Washington Post in Washington, D.C. Our panel is called Beyond the Peace Dividend, Modern Warfare, Defense Industry, and Europe's Strategic Choices. I think Gary's brilliant speech just laid out, I think, most of the challenges that I think we need to discuss. It's just worth talking about, putting a finer point on it. You know, we need to talk about war, even though this is a conference broadly devoted to multipolarity. War is with us, it's real now. There's been a lot of discussion about rules and cooperation, and it strikes me that it's difficult to talk about rules without enforcement, and difficult to talk about cooperation without security. These are important things. So I agree with Gary's assessment that you know, there's a silver lining in all of this for Europe, and I'd really like to focus on Europe and how it's facing this moment. Mr. Anušić, let's start with you. Do you agree with Mr. Kasparov's assessment about NATO? And you know, what's next for Europe from your perspective?
Thank you for the question, and I'd like to warm you everybody here in Dubrovnik, and I will switch on the domestic language in Croatia.
Mm-hmm.
Ne slažem se u potpunosti sa gospodinom Kasparovim iz jednog razloga. NATO nije mrtav, NATO je samo u jednom izazovnom vremenu i u jednom trenutku u kojem nakon doslovno godina i desetljeća od njegovog osnivanja 1947. godine je po prvi puta u biti došao u iskušenje da djeluje, da radi, da dokaže i pokaže svoj razlog postojanja. Izuzevši iz tog 2001. godine 11. rujan, kada je aktiviran članak 5. i kada su sve članice NATO saveza pomogle i bile uz Sjedinjene Američke Države kada su one napadnute na svome tlu. Rezultiralo je tom naravno poslije rata u Afganistanu koji je spomenuo gospodin Kasparov i sve ono dalje što se događalo. NATO je u izazovnim vremenima i ova izazovna vremena uvijek pokažu najbolje i najgore, najspremnije i najnespremnije sustave, ljude, pa tako i NATO savez kao takav. Ono što smo mogli svjedočiti i što svjedočimo u ovih proteklih 5 godina, da Europa mora ozbiljnije uzeti u obzir i shvatiti obavezu svoje sigurnosti i branjenja svog teritorija i svojih interesa. Predsjednik Trump je to nekoliko puta rekao, čak i u prvom mandatu, da nećemo više braniti Europu bezuvjetno, da Europa mora izdvajati određena sredstva da bi mogla samu sebe braniti, što ja u potpunosti podržavam i odobravam. Ali, isto tako, Europa je shvatila poruku i u ovom trenutku Europa dostiže sve one ciljeve, sposobnosti i operativne vještine koje mora imati da bi mogla obraniti svoj teritorij, svoje granice, svoju demokraciju, svoju neovisnost. I ja se nadam da ćemo u idućih nekoliko godina dostići tu razinu da ćemo biti u potpunosti samo održivi u smislu obrane i sigurnosti. Moja procjena je, barem za Oružane snage Republike Hrvatske, da ćemo do 2030. godine biti u potpunosti popunjeni u smislu brojčanog sastava i profesionalnog i pričuvnog sastava, da ćemo biti u potpunosti opremljeni modernom tehnologijom i modernom opremom i da ćemo biti u potpunosti spremni i uvježbani kao oružana sila za sve zadaće koje budu bile pred nama. I ne smijemo napustiti koncept NATO-a, iako možda neke države to dovode sada u pitanje, ne smijemo napustiti taj koncept ni po koju cijenu. To je jedan vojni savez koji u ovom trenutku, pa možemo reći da jedini u svijetu, odaje sigurnost, stabilnost, brani demokraciju i slobodu čovjeka i ne smijemo napustiti koncept NATO-a kakav god on u budućnosti bio. On mora postojati. Vojni savez obrambeni mora postojati jer nažalost postoje države, postoje zemlje, a vidjeli smo to sada na primjeru Rusije koja je spremna protiv svih međunarodnih prava i pravila napasti neovisnu svoju susjednu zemlju, izvršiti invaziju i evo punih 4 godine, 3 ili 4 mjeseca granatirati i civilne ciljeve, ubijati civile i dalje pokušavati osvojiti tu zemlju. Dok je takvih zemalja, dok je takvih politika i dok je takvih vođa, NATO mora postojati kao jedna protuteža i sve što činimo i radimo moramo učiniti u smjeru da NATO preživi i da NATO iz ovog izađe jači, snažniji, zreliji i na kraju krajeva spremniji.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Mr. Budris, I mean, I imagine you agree with a lot of the sort of assessment of NATO, that NATO needs to change because Europe is stepping up more. But, you know, Lithuania is leading, I believe at this point, spending as a percentage of GDP in the alliance, and is cooperating closely with Ukraine, trying to build back. Has Europe gotten, has there been a sea change in European understanding of what NATO will be in the future? Is there any going back? I'm just reminded, you know, when President Biden was elected, you know, that he gave the speech saying America's back, and it did feel like Europe at that point said, okay, America's back. Another speech by a future American president, do you think there'll be a sigh of relief, or has Europe now committed to this new path of self-resilience and defending itself?
Thank you. Well, there are a lot of questions in one of your questions, and first of all, let me start that I do not agree with the statement that NATO is dead, because if it is dead now, we should reprioritize what we are doing right now. Then we should leave aside the concept of NATO 3.0 and then move to something else, because within this new NATO concept, that is conventional forces that are needed to being developed in Europe, and then go hand in hand with Americans within the comprehensive deterrence, meaning that the nuclear deterrence comes from United States in the form of the extended nuclear deterrence, and conventional forces are built in Europe. If NATO is not working, it means that in Europe we miss this essential part. We should have no doubt that Russia would use nuclear coercion from the day one or even day -1 against us. So we have to discuss this. And then also deep strike capabilities, and then also discuss how far we can extend and project our military power. So it means that we have to redraw everything that we are doing right now. So sometimes when I hear that European defense development would be not complementary with the NATO or something as a form of substitute, I think that it is hallucination or whether speculation, because we cannot afford this. The number of increased defense spending in NATO, just to remind you, it didn't come with the new US administration. It didn't come with President Trump. We had these numbers before. When we finished with the NATO regional plans, then we moved to NATO capability targets. We saw the gap, and the number for defense spending to fill this gap within then share of burden, meaning before NATO 3.0 concept even emerged, was that we need to increase it up to 4% for the clear defense spending. We knew it. What President Trump did, you know, he was the major lone factor to make us a decision that we are going into that direction with the pledge that we made at the Hague Summit. So what I see now, what is needed, we have to build a strong leg, or European leg, with conventional forces, and we are very much behind the timeline and schedule. I was criticizing, and I'm really skeptical about the deadline 2035. Who will wait for us till 2035? We had to make it till 2030. In Lithuania increased our defense spending this year. It is 5.4%, and we say that we will spend as much as it is needed, up to 6% probably next year, because we are measuring it by capabilities that we can develop. We have really big ambitions to achieve it till 2030, and then still the question will be whether our stockpiles are sufficient enough to keep war fighting for a certain time frame. So this is challenge number one. The challenge number two is the defense spending, and especially in Europe, and I'm not being the Minister of Defense, but Minister of Foreign Affairs. For me, the concern is that those money will be the main fiscal leverage that we will have in the upcoming, for Lithuania, 5 to 10 years. We won't be able to spend more on other fields. Defense spending, that will be the priority, and it's billions and billions. This year it's 4 billion alone, and then it will increase, of course, with the economy still growing. So we have to transform this investment also into the economy development. And economy development, that's defense industry, that's dual-use technologies, and that's other industries that are supporting those. And how we will do this, it depends on us, on our wise policies. So it's not only about transforming spending to capabilities, but also transforming also it to the new impetus for the growth of our economy. And this is challenging to do, and especially when we're spending so much in foreign markets. And I say foreign even within the Europe, because we cannot still talk about the European defense industry. because we still have so much protectionism. Try to sell something, in the big countries in European Union. I have these conversations with my companies each day, and they are saying that, look, it's impossible to do this, because we still have a lot of nationalism here, and whether we are creating 28th regime within the defense industry what concerns licensing, or we will be just separating ourselves, and as a small countries, we all understand that we are too little for the world.
Mr. Primorac, maybe tell us a little bit about the money that the minister was just mentioning. At your seat, how's it look from the European Investment Bank? I mean, Europe is fabulously rich, but it's not like the money is buried in the backyard. It needs to be redirected, reinvestment priorities. Tell us a little bit about that perspective.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that I'm particularly happy to be here in Dubrovnik and participating in this panel. Well, the topic is very much relevant. I was just listening to previous speakers, and I can say that you can look at it from different perspectives, definitely. So when you think about defense in terms of financing, defense is practically the purest of public goods. And this is something that we have to acknowledge. So when we are questioning the role of the state and where the state should intervene and what goods should be financed publicly, then we always think about the concept of public goods and the classification of goods in this sense. So if you have something that is non-rivalry, so to say, in consumption and production and not exclusively, those are the principles that practically are connected to pure public goods. In this sense, why am I mentioning this, talking about Europe and European defense future and defense financing? If you have a security and treat it as a public good, it should be financed on a supranational level. Countries, devoting certain percentage of GDP to defense financing, if they just acquire ammunition from, different parts of the world, if they acquire technologies that are not communicating to each other, then it does not make much sense. You are just, increasing the spending, and this is not very coherent and very effective in this sense. So I would think that for European Union in general, we should think more of common spending in terms of financing the defense, because otherwise, if you have a public good and you definitely have some certain free riders, certain countries that are close to the border, they value this public good much higher than the others who are far from the conflict. So whereas certain countries that are, so to say, near the front lines, they have to spend 5% of GDP for defense, protecting the whole continent, and then the others, which are, far west, so to say, can spend more, making their economies more productive, more efficient, and more competitive in sense. So this is the kind of a discussion that we should have within the European Union. Now, when it comes to financing, I'm also glad that the defense is not being observed any longer as pure military. It's now also being connected with technology, with innovation, with industrial capabilities, and this is something that is being increasingly recognized. In this sense, public budgets will definitely be still very much under pressure, but they will certainly not be sufficient to satisfy the investment gap that previous speakers have mentioned and discussed. So in this sense, we should also see how to mobilize private investments, how to crowd in private capital, and you cannot do that if there is no stability, if there is no predictable, so to say, procurements in sense that you devote certain percentage of GDP or certain percentage of national budgets and devote this to long-term financing of defense. Otherwise, also the industry will not scale up. If they are not certain that they can sell in the next 5-10 years the same scale, it will be challenging also for the industry to scale up. So when we talk about the innovation, technological base, so to say, industrial capabilities, we have that in Europe. The question is how to crowd in private investments, and this is what the European Investment Bank does. We do it through different instruments. We do public sector financing, we do corporate financing, we finance projects in different areas. We do it also through venture debt instruments. We do it through intermediate financing, meaning through commercial banks or national development banks, financing small and medium-sized enterprises. And we also do it in the equity market. So I can say that practically if you can separate and divide this defense and security sector into several pillars, we are active in infrastructure financing. We finance from military barracks to mobility corridors and so on, but we also finance the industrial capabilities. We are active in quantum computing, in artificial intelligence, in space, satellites, but also in terms of innovation through intermediate financing with small and medium-sized enterprises. And also equity market, we have this defense equity facility, which was quite efficient. So we have mobilized a lot of resources, around 175 million euros that mobilized also the private investments, and we are now having the defense equity facility 2.0, which will be upscaled fund of funds, so to say, where we intend to mobilize around 1 billion euros. We have also changed in a way. So the European Investment Bank was purely Europe's climate and green bank. So the geopolitical circumstances have somehow also forced us to do something. So in this sense, we have moved to, first of all, dual use, and then also to pure defense spending, which we do now. In the last year, only in 2025, we have deployed around 4 billion euros for defense financing, and we have practically fourfold increased this amount, and we are also on track to reach 4.5 billion this year to 2026. So we aim to devote around 5% of our budget or deployment annual, which is around 100 billion euros to defense financing.
Thanks. And Mr. Embry, I don't know about you. I sometimes get in trouble by saying, though, you know, my roots are from here, and I feel very strongly about Europe, that actually the Trump shock has been very, I think, good for Europe. But has it gone too far? How does it look like to you at this point from America?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and thank you to the Croatian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the invitation. It's an honor to be on the panel. Broadly, I'd agree with you. Trump shock is not comfortable for our European allies and partners. It's not a soft and gentle reminder or tap on the shoulder, but it's what's been necessary to actually unlock key decisions. I refer back to Minister Boudris' comments about getting to 5% at The Hague, about NATO 3.0, about moving into the next generation of capabilities, but I'd also take a step back strategically and say this isn't just something that President Trump has said. We can go all the way back to the first Supreme Allied Commander Europe, Dwight D. Eisenhower, earlier Supreme Allied Commander, later President of the United States, in his time as Supreme Allied Commander, talking about needing the European allies to step up, needing the military capabilities and defense capabilities to be reconstituted at a greater and faster pace. So this is something that, from the American side of the pond, we've been raising literally since the beginning of the NATO alliance. Now, the issue is that these rhetorical reminders have not been sufficient to actually move spending and capabilities in the direction they need to go for our European partners to take full responsibility for conventional defense. As a result, the Trump shock has actually delivered that in the second administration. The true changes in capabilities and posture by the American military, Defense Department, and others has incentivized our European partners to really come to the table and step to the fore on this. And I do think there are benefits, many benefits to this on the European side as well. Deepened industrial-based cooperation on defense and other issues. ITAR reform on our side of the pond is something we're talking about. There are good things here for the citizenry and populations of Europe, as well as the general increase in defense. And I think sometimes we go too far in saying, well, this is the United States fully stepping out of NATO. Yet I point to the recent discussions that became public about deploying nuclear weapons into the eastern part of the alliance, into Poland, into Finland, to really reinforce the American extended deterrent that underpins the deterrence of the Russian state and stops them from utilizing nuclear blackmail against our European allies. So as I said, the Trump shock, not comfortable, sometimes not nice, I'll freely admit, but it has been effective in moving the needle on spending and capabilities in Europe.
Mr. Anušić, you know, the part of this conversation is also strategic choices for Europe, and I'd like to just maybe ask you to zoom out a little bit here. It's been striking watching, you know, the drama in the Middle East unfold, and Europe has, again, it's been the case for a while that the Americans take the lead on this, and, you know, do a disastrous war in my opinion, but nevertheless, still the European voice is very quiet there. Maybe talk to us a little bit about strategic choices and you know, I think it was in the first panel on the first day, Charles Powell said, you know, in the multipolar world, Europe does not yet see itself as a pole, and it may not want to be. Should Europe want to have, you know, more of a say in its neighborhood, and what should the priorities be, do you think?
Europa je prvenstveno zamišljena u samom početku kao zajednica koja je ekonomski jaka, koju povezuju demokracije, vladavina prava i na kraju krajeva zajedničko funkcioniranje prvenstveno na tržištu ekonomije. Ja to tako barem gledam i vidim. Ono što se dogodilo sada je Europu zateklo. Svi smo nešto o tome rekli i ja sam na kraju krajeva o tome nešto rekao i u mom odgovoru na prvo vaše pitanje. Europa je dobila vrijeme da se pripremi, da se organizira, da se na kraju krajeva profilira u nešto što Europa do sad nije ozbiljno politički komunicirala, a to je obrana i sigurnost. Danas, kod nas u Hrvatskoj se kaže da nas je muka natjerala na takvu odluku i stvarno je tako. Ta muka je rat koji je izbio u Ukrajini, koji je izazvala Rusija agresijom i invazijom na Ukrajinu. Ono što Europa u ovom trenutku može činiti i raditi, svakako se držati svojih saveznika koji su tradicionalno saveznici Europe, definitivno Sjedinjene Američke Države. Politika ima oscilacije, cikluse kvalitetnog i dobrog funkcioniranja, malo lošijeg ili jako lošijeg. Mi smo sad možda u nekakvoj fazi izlaska iz najgore faze i početka nekakvog generalnog stava kako Europe, tako i cijelog novog, ajmo reći, poretka svjetskoga, gdje je Europi mjesto i gdje se Europa treba profilirati, gdje Europa treba naći svoj prostor i svoju poziciju kako bi bila globalan, jak i snažan igrač. Europa je preko 500 milijarde ljudi, gospodarstvo je najjače u svijetu ili jedno od najjačih u svijetu i ako se kvalitetno i dobro organizira i udružimo, možemo biti jedni od vodećih organizacija u smislu političkom ili kako god teritorijalnom na svijetu. Ali ponovno se vraćamo na ono. Europa nije o tome razmišljala, sada je prisiljena i o tome razmišlja, o tome mora raditi. Drugačije promatra politika u Portugalu, u Španjolskoj, politiku u Poljskoj, u Finskoj, u zemljama koje graniče sa Ukrajinom ili graniče sa istokom, u ovom slučaju neki graniče, naravno, Baltičke zemlje uz Finsku, graniče i sa Rusijom. One drugačije doživljavaju situaciju, pa to je tako i kolega iz Litve i govorio. Ja mislim da Europa treba se što više oslanjati na vlastite snage, na vlastite sposobnosti, jer imamo s čime, imamo kako. Teško će to biti objasniti biračkom tijelu koje svake 4 godine izlazi i bira nove lidere. Nitko od lidera ne želi izgubiti izbore. A ljudi nemaju osjećaj da su vremena možda i više nego ozbiljna, da se mora dio sredstava uzeti od socijale, uzeti od zdravstva, uzeti od poljoprivrede i usmjeriti prema obrani. To će biti najveći zadatak svakog pojedinačnog lidera i generalnog lidera Europske unije, kako i na koji način dobiti potporu za te politike i kako i na koji način osigurati političku stabilnost i potporu da se u tvojoj državi i generalno u Europskoj uniji da veća pozornost obrambenoj politici i sigurnosti. To je nešto što će biti najveći izazov svi u nas koji smo ovdje i koji obnašamo političke dužnosti, naravno onih koji vode države, predsjednici i premijeri. Tu bi trebali imati zajednički stav i zajedničku sinergiju. Nećemo imati, to budite sigurni i već sada su određene pukotine države koje smatraju da ne treba ulagati, da se ne treba miješati u ukrajinski sukob i tako dalje. Ja mislim suprotno. Ja mislim da Ukrajina u ovom trenutku brani Europu i ima ulogu obrambenog štita Europe. 4 godine i 4 mjeseca herojski se bore od možda i nego zasigurno jedne od najvećih vojnih sila na svijetu. Uspješno se brane i pokazuju prvenstveno Europi nove tehnologije i znanja koje mi trebamo prihvaćati, učiti od njih, ali pokazuju da su hrabri i da su ustrajani u svojoj borbi za demokraciju i za svoju državu. Da je Ukrajina prije 4 godine ili 4,5 godine izgubila ovaj rat i da je Rusija, kako je zamislila, u jednom danu svrgnuti predsjednika Zelenskog i preuzeti praktički i postaviti marionetsku vladu u Ukrajini, rat bi već bio na granicama puno bližima Europske unije, a možda i već unutar Europske unije. U to budite 100% sigurni, tu nema nikakve dileme. Oni su uspjeli učiniti ono što Rusija nije očekivala, a Europa nije bila spremna. Danas njihovo znanje, njihove vještine, sve vojske svijeta trebaju učiti od njih, trebaju im dati apsolutnu podršku u svakom smislu, kako ekonomskom, gospodarskom, tako i političkom, da ustraju u svojoj borbi. Promjena granica silom ne smije biti nešto što će se događati i što se događa, što će biti legitimno od strane nekoga agresora, pa ćemo mi kao međunarodna ili međunarodna zajednica to blagosloviti i reći ok, dobro, ajde, vi ste jači, pa i možete uzeti. Ko je sljedeći na redu i koja država može ponovno očekivati to što je učinila Rusija Ukrajini. I generalno mislim da Europa mora i da je ovo biti, svaka kriza je prilika i ovo je prilika ogromna za Europu da se pozicionira i da postane manje ovisna, to da postane više neovisna u smislu obrane, sigurnosti i vojnog utjecaja generalno u cijelome svijetu. Danas je obrambena industrija, a na što je Europa jako naslonjena, a to je gospodarstvo, ekonomija i jako osjetljiva na to, i danas je vojna industrija postala industrija broj 1 u svijetu. Ajmo tražiti tu prostor. Hrvatska tu traži prostor i jako puno radimo na tome i podupiremo našu vojnu obrambenu industriju. Idemo prebaciti dio naših potencijala i kapaciteta industrijskih, govorim na europskoj razini, upravo u vojnom smjeru, u obrambenom smjeru, u onome što će biti naš proizvod i što će biti na kraju krajeva naše znanje, naše vještine, naše sposobnosti, jer u ovih proteklih 4 ili 5 godina, kada vratimo film unazad i kada smo krenuli u opremanje naših oružanih snaga, a ne samo Hrvatska, nego sve zemlje Europe, došli smo do jednog svi zaključka. Mi nemamo dovoljno naoružanja, nemamo dovoljno proizvodnje i nemamo dovoljno znanja. Pa evo, ogromna prilika za gospodarstvo i otvaranje novih grana. Kao što sam rekao, najosjetljivija je Europa upravo na ekonomskoj strani, pa ajmo onda ekonomiju na kraju krajeva osnažiti i ojačati upravo kroz obrambenu industriju.
Minister Budrys, defense minister, was just saying, focusing on Ukraine as the shield of Europe. You're right there on the front lines and cooperating very closely. Also, this question of political will in Europe to do the next steps. Tell us a little bit about, in an earlier panel it was discussed about European perspectives for Ukraine, roadblocks to that. How should we be thinking about the future of Europe and Ukraine without prejudging the answer of this? What does partnership look like, and what's the path forward?
To answer your great question in one sentence would be, there will be no EU without Ukraine. We need European Union as geopolitical actor, as geoeconomic actor. That would be the agent globally setting the environment, setting the rules, how the world will look like. We all declare that, but we all understand that within the EU there are so many problems with decision making, with different interests, sometimes different values that we also don't share with some of the member states. And I'm happy that after some elections there are more common ground for shared values. But looking into the future, we see that we are the most effective when we are forced to be effective. And now the war is the most transformative geopolitical element. Why we are disengaging in the energy trade from Russia? Because of the war. Why we are now rethinking the role of the Middle East and new corridors? Because of the war against Iran. We were forced. What concerns sanctions, we were led by US leadership. That was within the G7 coordinated actions in the very beginning of 22 that led the European Union to those fast decisions. So without the external push, we are still not fast enough. We are still not in the position to deliver. So without Ukraine, and this is our interest, to have more security. Without Ukraine, EU will be weak, and we will go into the regional formats. I am sure about it. That's in our interest, not only on the countries on the front line, but also in Europe's interest. So we have more security. What is the main source now of power, military power in Europe? Of course, it is Ukraine. And we know what Ukraine needs from us. With all the reconstruction demand and all the economy growth needs and the others. So there will be a new forms of integration. And if it is not EU integration, I say here's the skepticism. Oh, what we will do with the transport. Oh, what we will do with the agriculture and this and that. And our single market, you know, it still doesn't function enough to have this big country included. Then we will go for some regional formats. Yeah. And that will be really disintegrating process. Because I'm sure that Ukraine will play its big role in regional defense, as it is right now. We just signed the drone defense agreement with Ukraine, and there are others to follow on this. So de facto, they will be part of this system. So of course, the easiest solution is to get them into EU and NATO. That's what we said. And still now, I believe that in the NATO membership, that's the clear, fast-forward way to all the an answer to all the challenges and questions. But if it is not there, we will look for the other options. And EU enlargement, that will be the biggest test. If it won't happen, if we won't open the 5 additional clusters for Ukraine, if it won't happen this autumn, I can tell you, we can count the days till EU is dead. And then there would be the need for another keynote speech, but without the different first sentence.
Mr. Primorac, maybe you can then talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned in your in the last round, you know, the challenge of not duplicating and to, you know, coordinating this kind of investment. How should Europe be thinking about, you know, investing in Ukraine and integrating the very successful Ukrainian, you know, defense base into the sort of larger European project? And what are the challenges there? And you know, is Europe up to it?
Sure. I would just like to remind of a few numbers in terms of, you know, contemplating about the support to Ukraine. Russia generates around 2% of world GDP. European Union in general, it's around 18%. NATO, it's slightly less than 50% of the world's GDP. So just to give you a flavor of what, you know, relationship of powers, economic powers we are discussing here, and in terms of the defense spending and the capacity that we have, what we are practically contemplating. In terms of what Ukraine has succeeded by being so, you know, diligent and brave and stubborn, so to say, at the battlefield, is that innovation in military doesn't come necessarily from a sophisticated, you know, base, but from being quick, from being innovative, from learning quickly, from implementing what you learn directly at the battlefield into the production. And this is something that Europe in general can learn from. And if we do not treat Ukraine only as recipients of support or aid in any sense, but as partners that we can collaborate with, helping us, European Union in general, to develop this technological and industrial base based on their experience, building up on our capacities, financial capacities, internal market, etc. I think there are really a lot of opportunities there. When it comes to the European Investment Bank in general, our support to Ukraine has been visible from the day one, so from 2022, practically from the beginning of the unprovoked Russian aggression, we have deployed around 4.5 billion euros in different instruments, sources of support. There was only recently announced in Gdansk 475 million, together with partner countries, Poland, BGK, the development bank there, trying to support Ukraine. So we already do a lot of work as a bank, supporting the infrastructure projects, supporting the projects in border protection, but also housing projects, supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, supporting the economy in general. And I think this is really a good way forward.
Jordan, maybe tell us a little bit, in your opinion then, the G7 meeting sort of indeterminate what whether President Trump has turned again and is maybe a little bit more optimistic about Ukraine. Seems to me from the U.S. perspective, again, backing this miracle that's happening in Ukraine is a no-brainer. And again, it's good for Europe and the rest of it. Do you see, have you heard any sense that there's a pivot coming again, and that might be the best way to sort of, again, patch over some of these earlier shocks?
Sure, it's a good question. Obviously, I was heartened to hear the statements out of the G7 from President Trump concerning Ukraine and discussing the reality that we all know, that the Ukrainians have been willing to negotiate in good faith, to have these discussions as they have so bravely and heroically fought on the battlefield to defend their citizens and their territory. And that it's really been Russia and the Putin regime that has been the stopping block for all of this, that has refused to negotiate, period, much less in good faith. Obviously, we've had cooperation in the midst of the discussion of shifting to Europe taking the lead on supporting Ukraine, which I think is only natural, it being a war in Europe, as our keynote speaker so eloquently told us about. There's been cooperation throughout on intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. There's been continuation of U.S. munitions sold through Pearl after extensive U.S. munitions transfers earlier. But I think there is a sense in which Russia gave up their opportunity to have a friendly voice in the White House, and eye in the White House, especially coming out of the Alaska summit. There was really an opportunity that seemed to be extended from the President Trump to President Putin that really did not go anywhere. There wasn't any uptake in the Russian system. They didn't take any actual steps towards conflict termination, towards negotiations with the Ukrainians. And that really frustrated the president, and I think really has turned his opinion in favor of President Zelensky and the Ukrainians. Now, does this mean that suddenly the U.S. is going to return and take on, the majority of the burden for Ukraine support again and take it back from our European partners? I don't think that's the case. But I do think that there is an attitudinal shift by the president and the White House that I think is helpful in the context of ensuring that this next stage of the battle goes well, and also in thinking about how we integrate the lessons from Ukraine at the NATO level. Many of my fellow panelists have talked about ways in which bringing on Ukrainian capabilities and knowledge is important. I look, for example, to the Trophy Lab initiative that the Ukrainians just stood up, which will be excellent and really helpful as we go into the defense innovation that Mr. Primorac has talked about so much, to know exactly the vulnerabilities of these Russian systems that would be matching up against NATO forces and developing and redeveloping our kit that we're building out to defend and deter against such equipment.
Well, I want to let everyone soon go to have lunch. I know everyone's hungry. It's the challenge before the before lunch panel. But let's just wrap on a very quick lightning round. And really, when I mean quick, let's just wrap it like this. Many challenges ahead. I think we've laid them out well. But I personally feel a little optimistic. I want to just ask each one of you, and you can qualify it a little bit. Are you optimistic for the future, or are you overcome by the worries? Mr. Minister.
Ja sam svakako optimističan, drugačije ne možemo ni funkcionirati, moramo biti optimistični. Ali moramo shvatiti da određene promjene moramo raditi, one neće biti i nisu ugodne i već nisu ugodne, ali moramo se aklimatizirati ili prilagoditi okolnostima u kojima živimo. Optimizam je nešto što nas mora sve voditi, bez toga ne bi apsolutno ni trebali se baviti ovim poslom kojim radimo ako nismo optimistični, ako ne gledamo unaprijed da bi trebalo biti bolje i kvalitetnije za sve nas. Na kraju krajeva to je naša zadaća, stvoriti nas, politike koju je izabrana demokratskim izborima, to ljudi od nas očekuju, stvoriti bolje, optimističnije društvo, prosperitetnije i sve ono što na kraju krajeva donosi jedan takav optimizam o kojem ste vi sada rekli. Ali, optimizam neće doći sam po sebi, on nije samo priča koju ćemo mi jedni drugima pričati i uvjeravati se kako je sve lijepo, mi se moramo uhvatiti ozbiljnog posla. Taj posao zahtjeva ozbiljne promjene, ozbiljne ljude, ozbiljne odluke i ozbiljne projekte. I ja mislim da je budućnost u našim rukama, ničim drugima, ali kako ćemo je mi stvoriti, kako ćemo je pripremiti, kako ćemo je napraviti, to isključivo ovisi o nama. Zato se moramo krenuti sebi, pogledati se u ogledalo ili pogledati jedni drugi u oči i reći ok, do sad nismo radili kako treba, moramo neke stvari promijeniti, te stvari moramo zajednički promijeniti i mislim da nas apsolutno ništa ne može ugroziti u smislu optimizma u budućnosti.
Excellent, excellent. So one vote for optimism and political will, Mr. Minister?
Of course, we proved so many times that we can be effective and we can deliver, and there is ground to be optimistic. But first of all, we have to start with the alignment of strategic assessment. And then what is our goal number one? And of course, it is security and peace in Europe. What is our threat, the main threat? That's Russia. Direct, long-term, multi-dimensional threat to our security. So we have to concentrate on it. How we will deter it and how we will defend ourselves. That's keeping strong transatlantic alliance. That's increasing readiness of Europe and helping Ukraine. And only then, when we will do this, and it will take us some time, then we can move to another phase and discuss how we will have the relations with Russia. And I'm here reflecting a bit the discussion that we heard on the first panel, how to include Russia into the security system. How come? They are the main threat, and they are the main aggressor, occupying the territories of neighboring nations, starting from 2008 from Georgia, then 2014 Ukraine. We need security from them. We need effective deterrence and defense. This is the main task. If we agree on this, of course, we have the will and resources, and then we have to just decide how we will do it effectively.
Mr. Primorac, same question. There you go.
Like somebody doesn't want to hear that, but I'm very optimistic. Because if you see what's happening with all these geopolitical, geoeconomic challenges, it is just streamlining the process which has been underway in Europe for quite some time. And this is the necessity to make Europe more resilient, to make Europe take more care about our own security, about diversifying supply sources when it comes to energy, for example, about securing the supply chains which are closer to home, which are more reliable. And I think this will make Europe really stronger. And in this sense, it makes a lot of sense. I don't see this process as being something that would replace transatlantic partnership, but I think it will make it stronger, because if you have a more fair balance of power, and this is something that will definitely happen in Europe after we treat all our challenges and difficulties in the most appropriate manner, the partnership will be even stronger. So if you see the consequences practically of this exercise, to put it mildly, it will make Europe stronger, it will make partnerships stronger. It will be a painful process, like when you have children that stay home with their parents for quite some time. If there's somebody from Italy here, you are quite familiar with the term mamoni. Mamoni, they stay until their 30s with their families. So it's hard to get away. It's hard to live on your own. It's hard to make these changes and take care of your own future. But it makes a person stronger. It makes you better prepared for the challenges to come, and I think this is exactly what's happening to Europe, so this is why I'm so optimistic. Thanks.
Excellent. Jordan, you have 2 minutes and 48 seconds.
I'll try to be brief. I would agree with what the previous panelists have said, that overall I'm optimistic for the future of the Transatlantic Alliance, the future of the NATO alliance. With that said, I'd also agree with Mr. Primorac that we're going to go through, and are still going through, a bit of turbulence. I think about this sort of as the long bit of a hike behind a peak, where you don't see the nice view, you're just trekking up the elevation change, but then you get to the top and you can see sort of the beautiful vision. I think that's what we're working towards, is that vision of deterrence that's backed by credible capabilities by our European allies, that's backed by an American extended deterrent that has this fair and equalized burden sharing across the alliance, and a true sort of strategic depth and wisdom added from our European partners as well as they survey the theater. So ultimately, I am optimistic about where we go from here, about the possibilities for the alliance in the years ahead, as we move through sort of the struggle to get up to that summit.
Okay, great. Well, round of applause for the panel here. I hope you all take that optimism to lunch and enjoy, and see you back here after that.